In this video, I'm going to be discussing how to handle a situation in sports photo automation when you're using a CSV file that has commas in the data. And the first thing you need to understand is what a CSV file is. CSV stands for comma separated value. And if we look at the CSV file opened in a text editor, we'll see that there's these commas that we don't see in the spreadsheet between each of the cells. And these are separator characters. And so these are invisible to you when you're looking at the spreadsheet. But when the file is saved, it saves, basically the file is a text file and it saves with these commas in order to separate the data columns. So that way when a program like Sports Photo Automation or any other computer program for that matter opens the file, it knows how to separate the data. So in the case with a spreadsheet where you have a comma in the data, you obviously don't want to use that comma to separate your data. So it's going to put in these quotation marks. And this tells the spreadsheet program that this comma is not a separator, but instead it's part of the text within the cell. But Sports Photo Automation is not smart enough to be able to use it this way and know that it can ignore these quotation marks and not use this as a separator. And the reason why is because there's the rabbit hole gets pretty deep when you start diving into it with these quotations, and especially if you have quotes inside the cell, it gets a lot more complicated than this. I'm not going to go into all of that. But Sports Photo Automation, the only thing it's going to do is separate by commas. So when it sees a data file like this, what it's going to see, it's going to see this in one cell, and then it is going to use that comma as a separator, and it's going to see the next data over as this. So it's not going to separate the data correctly because it's not able to treat that comma correctly. Now fortunately there is a very easy fix for this, and so whenever you have commas in your CSV, whether it's commas in the file name or commas anywhere in the text, you're going to want to save that as a TSV file. And if you've noticed in Sports Photo Automation where it says use CSV/TSV data, that means that it can accept either one of those files. Now I am in OpenOffice. Actually it's LibreOffice or LibreOffice, however you pronounce that, which is essentially it's a clone of OpenOffice. And it should work the same in Excel, as well as other spreadsheet programs will work similar. But we're going to save this as a TSV file. So if I just hit File, Save As, now the first time you save the file, it's going to ask for your delimiter character if you're saving as a CSV. The delimiter is that comma that separates that. That's what a delimiter is. If you're resaving a file, it's not going to ask you unless you click on Edit Filter Settings. So we're going to do that. I'm going to rename this. I'll call it Tutorial 2. And then in order to save this as a TSV, you're not going to see TSV in your drop down as any extension. So you're going to type that in. A TSV is a tab separated value file. And I don't know why programs like Excel or OpenOffice don't have a standard TSV export. Some programs do, but I know these two spreadsheet programs with Excel and OpenOffice don't. But in any case, you're going to type in TSV. So we're exporting as whatever name .tsv. I have my edit filter settings on. And when I hit save, the edit filter settings, that being checked on, it's going to bring up this window. And like I said, the first time you save a document, you'll get this window. But if you're resaving, you'll have to check that box in order to get it. But then you'll have your field delimiter. And this is where it's deciding what is going to be used to separate those cell values. So if I click Tab here and press OK, it's now saved this as a .tsv file with a tab delimiter. So now if I go to, where did I save that now? Oh, here it is. It didn't have the same icon, so I didn't see it. It shows a text file icon. But if I just open this in Notepad now, so now we can see that each of these data cells, there is no comma in between. We see this space in between, and that space is actually a tab. So the computer program will see the tab key, but you just see it as empty space. And then the towns, these are the only places here we do see the comma because that was part of the data. And so when the Sports Photo Automation now goes to separate the data with the TSV file, it's going to separate based on the tab key, and so this comma is not going to affect it. So when you go to load that in for SPA, you just load it in the same way, and SPA will allow you to load in a TSV or a CSV file. If you choose any other file, for example, if I choose this PSD here and I hit open, it's going to tell me it's the wrong format. It needs to be in a CSV or a TSV. But when you select either a CSV or a TSV, it knows based on the file extension how it's going to parse the data. So it knows that the extension was a .tsv, so it knows to separate that by tab. Now if you save this and you don't, let me see, if you don't change this to a TSV when you save it, even if you do the tab delimited properties and it looks right when you open it in Notepad, if this still says CSV, it's not going to be able to import that file correctly, because based on what this says is going to tell SPA how it needs to separate the data. So if it says TSV, it'll look for tabs. If it says CSV, it will look for commas. And in all honesty, I wanted for SPA to force everything to TSV because this file format makes a lot more sense, because commas are too common to use in your data. And tabs, you'll never be using tabs in any of your text data or your file names. But CSV is just too common of a file format. There's too many other programs that export that for you. Even if you have the option for TSV, most people don't know about it and they use CSV anyway. So for that reason, I programmed SPA to accept either CSV or TSV. But just know that commas will cause problems with CSV. They will not cause problems with TSV. So if you have commas, use TSV, and that will eliminate any issues you have with those files.